Today is November 24th, 2020, and you found another episode of Thinking Through Autonomy. Today we're here with Israel Stol, author, rocket engineer, yes, the real kind, an expert guide in empowering people to harness their own creativity and innovation. Israel's back with us for an encore. Why do you ask? Well, because you asked for it. Israel has two of the most listened to episodes on Thinking Through Autonomy through our third season, and his show page is one of the most visited pages on our website since COVID emerged. It's clear that his message resonates in these difficult times. Welcome to Thinking Through Autonomy, a podcast to help you understand the promise and impact of autonomous land and air vehicles in our world. I'm Ken Dunlap, managing partner of Catalyst Go, taking you on this journey. Hear and read more at thinkingthroughautonomy.com. Now it's time to take your hands off the wheel, foot off the pedal, hand off that throttle, and let's go. Israel, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Good morning. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned, we're living in the age of COVID right now, and I trust you and your family are doing well?
We are doing wonderfully well as our dog.
That's good. One of the things that you and I thought that we needed to talk about a little bit more is how things are changing now in terms of creativity and innovation in this age of COVID. And, things seemingly have turned upside down. And I'm wondering, Israel, why do you think that your messages on creativity and innovation resonate in these times?
I think it has to do with the challenges that some companies are encountering because of COVID. Many companies lost their clients or some of their clients due to bankruptcies and closures. They lost revenues, significant revenues, due to reduction in sales of their services and products. They had to lay off or furlough quite a few of their valuable, highly qualified employees. And the employees that are staying or are remaining with these companies face their own difficulties. They are demoralized. Many of them are disappointed. They encounter a great deal of uncertainty, fear of their job security, employability, as well as financial insecurities for themselves and their families. So you combine all of those, and those companies have some serious challenges to come out of it, and creativity may be one way to be deployed to help some of these companies.
And I picked up on the word maybe. So does that mean that creativity and innovation may not be the best medicines in all circumstances, or am I hearing that wrong, and creativity and innovation should be looked at as the only key to get out of this COVID crisis? What exactly would creativity and innovation do for us these days?
I think creativity and innovation, if it's properly deployed and practiced, it's going to help a great deal the companies to turn around the difficulties or deal with the difficulties that they are encountering nowadays. I don't think that creativity and innovation is the sole solution for their problem. It's one of their important approaches of dealing with COVID.
And you and I, we just talked a little bit, and you shared some of the effects on creativity and innovation that we're seeing in our companies. But there's a personal toll, isn't there? There's a toll on everybody who comes to work. What are you seeing in terms of the people and employees who are having to live with COVID at home, live with COVID in the workplace? What is the effect on employees' attitudes that you're seeing?
That's a very good question, and I don't think there's a single answer to that, because it depends to a very large degree what kind of jobs different people have, different employees. But for people that are on site, that are personally involved with continuing to do their jobs, often they encounter a great deal of competition for resources. There's inter and intra departmental conflict and strife due to this competition. There is still a deep sense of insecurity among these people because there's a reduced pool of qualified and skilled people and resources. There's a competition for those that are remaining. Often there is disruptive communication, whether it's because of geography, different places, different, let's say, part of the company are different geographies, and sometimes there are difficulties even communicating virtually.
So I think it's safe to say, and probably, goes without saying, that what COVID is doing in the workplace is magnifying problems that are already there, but it's also introducing new ones. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair statement, yes. Mm-hmm.
So why don't we talk about, we keep mentioning in the opening 6 minutes, creativity and innovation, and yet we really haven't defined those for the audience. Could you maybe step us through and say a little bit, what is creativity? What is innovation? Are they the same things? But so let's start at the top. What's creativity, Israel?
Okay, I can describe it in a visual sense, okay? So I'm asking the listeners to imagine that they are in a universe of accessible information, access to different experiences, know-how, and so on.
I'm in the middle of the matrix?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I hope you stay there at least for the duration of this this podcast. Would you do that for me, please?
I promise.
So that's a very creative answer that you just gave me. Okay, so at any rate, please imagine that you are in a universe of accessible information in different areas, in engineering, sciences, culture, literature, all walks of life, basically. And then there is a problem of some type that somebody encounters, and that person or team or a group of people take some of those seemingly unrelated bits of accessible information and then they combine them in a certain fashion. And they combine it in a way that is aimed towards solving the problem. If they do it in a way that is really unique and very distinctly different from anything that was created before, that's what is called a singularity. It happened for the first time, okay, at any place before. That is an invention. That my definition of creativity and the process, creativity is recombinant imitation with a new twist. So any invention involves a twist, something new, something that recombined different bits of information and know-how into solving a given problem. The process itself can be defined also as creativity is the process of problem solving by inventing or conceptualizing novel approaches, solutions that benefit someone or something. While innovation is the process of implementing some of these novel solutions that benefit somebody or something. Creativity can exist without innovation, but innovation cannot exist without creativity. I hope I answered your question, Ken.
Yeah, but I'm a little slow this morning, and I want to maybe just take that group of statements apart. So if I understand you correctly, creativity is the process where I'm combining ideas and I'm creating an idea that hasn't existed before. Is that right so far?
That is correct.
And innovation, on the other hand, is taking those ideas, that creative thing that this team just put together, and turning it into something useful for somebody.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So I get that now.
Yeah, when it applies to innovation, the key word is implementation. Innovation implements the creative ideas.
So some people can be creative, other people's can be innovative. Do you see people who are creative and innovative at the same time? Are those two different skill sets?
Yes. different people have different aptitudes, among which they have aptitudes to be creative. Some people have a knack for implementing things. Okay, there are basically four categories when it comes to creativity, and those four categories are exceptionally creative people. There are the people that are creative. The third group is the competent practitioners, and the fourth group are the practitioners. So when you go towards the exceptionally creative, normally those people are the creative people. They are not necessarily the innovators, but as you move towards the competent practitioners, you get more into the category of people that generally are involved with implementing things. And that is the innovation.
Thanks. So let me just move on a little bit because I think I understand the foundational parts of creativity and innovation. But getting back to the idea that we are in this age of COVID right now, companies are struggling for survival. Workers are struggling to figure out really how to get the next meal on the table, especially with what's happening to the economy. And I'm wondering if it maybe break this apart. So if you're running a big company, what are some of the pressures right now that our companies are facing when it comes to creativity and innovation?
Well, companies, especially big ones, they have what's called the corporate inertia. They are used to do things the way they've done it before COVID. And some of these approaches, some of the business models and methodologies are not necessarily suitable for the new environment created by this epidemic. Hence, I think more effective deployment of creativity innovation will be beneficial to these companies.
Well, that brings up a good question, I think. If you are in the middle of this super gigantic company that does things the same way every day for eons, right? Since the beginning of time, this is the way we always did it. Do you think that you can have appreciation in this world where COVID is affecting everyone on where innovation and creativity should fit? Or is that just, a discussion that's outside your realm because you can't think any differently because the way the people around you think the same way?
I think the latter is very applicable to your question, but not all organizations or companies are affected to the same degree by COVID. Some companies, such as let's say Amazon, Facebook, Google, and so on, those are pharmaceutical. Those I put them in the category of essentials. Okay. They have their practices, everything has worked out, and it's generally immune to the disruptions that are caused by COVID. There are other companies that are affected very badly because many of those remaining among their employees, have to work virtually, okay, away from their offices. And some of these people encounter some difficulties. Those difficulties include sense of loss, since they are unable to be personally involved with what they have to carry, what responsibility them and their teams have to carry out physically. They feel sense of isolation and anger. And those are the people that could benefit from a different approach to running their organizations or companies. So it's not universal. COVID doesn't affect all companies the same way. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, point well taken. And on the more personal level, as we opened up at the start of this episode, this is a thing that each person listening to this podcast is facing on a daily basis. And in terms of pressures, we all know what our pressures are, but there's also a discussion you and I had previous to the start of this podcast where there are these unseen pressures as well, such as maybe the pressure to leave the job you're currently at to go to another one that either pays better or is more stable. Can you what kind of other examples are out there of kind of these hidden drivers that we probably don't recognize and that our supervisors don't recognize?
Well, I think that, and it all stems from a deep sense of insecurity, job insecurity and financial insecurity for the employees and often to their families. So, because of that, as an outcome, or as a result, many of them feel pressure to look for other jobs that are more secure and pay better. That's one of the pressures. The other pressures I already mentioned before. When while they are still in the company that hired them during or before COVID, they have to compete against other colleagues of theirs. And this is again the competition for resources. I mentioned it before. Reduced pool of qualified people. The companies don't have the same number of skilled people that they used to have and so on. And it's very frustrating and demoralizing to these people.
Which leads me to think that, based on what you described, that we're living in a world maybe where there's an emphasis on not rocking the boat, not challenging the thought, because that leads to instability in work. Does that? And is that, backwardly hurting innovation and creativity when rock the boat, don't rock the boat is the message?
Absolutely. So we were talking so far about some of the pressures on the employees that are left in the companies. But as a result of staying with these companies and the effects on the business cycle by COVID, many people are demoralized. They are disappointed about their career, that it doesn't go anywhere. They have the uncertainties that we already mentioned. And as a result, they become less loyal. They lose the sense of loyalty and drive to take initiative to improve the standing of the company and improve its success in the business world. Now, one of the consequences of that, there are employees that become what I call compliant acquiescent.
What does that mean?
What it means is they take orders, they do just what they are told to do on their job, but without any initiative. Now, they do that because they feel that they have to maintain their job security, and they don't want to rock the boat. So they become very, very, let's say, obedient employees, but the initiative, the creative fire in them is gone. And that's a big loss to the companies. Even though it's not very tangible, in the long run, it can have very, very significant adverse effect on the company.
But it seems to me that's kind of a basic human emotion when, for lack of a better word, the world around you is crumbling a little bit, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I am sure, Israel, that every listener on this podcast is suffering from death by Zoom right now, or death by Microsoft Team meetings, or death by whatever the current video platform of choice is. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about our virtual workforces and keeping employees motivated in a virtual world. Can we do that? Or is the rest of our professional careers going to be spent staring at a computer screen and watching 16 colleagues in a square in a small corner of your computer monitor talk about the next great product improvement or why some forms have not been filled out properly?
So are you asking whether the prospect of continuing to work virtually is going to be very, let's say, damaging and detrimental to the attitude of employees? Is that your question?
Well, I think two things. Yeah, I think, is it damaging? And then the second part would be, is it damaging innovation and creativity? And then the third part would be is, how do you keep somebody motivated?
Yes. So I think that it can be damaging to some people, It cannot be damaging to other people. It depends on their job. People that are, let's call them white collar employees, many of them work in pretty well-defined jobs, standardized procedures, standardized IT, and so on, accounting. They are doing pretty much the same job that they did in their office at their place of employment. So for them, it's not that let's say frustrating, because they are pretty much used to do the same job. But for other people that are forced to go virtual, but they are not used to that, and their companies have to respond to the changes brought about COVID, it can be very difficult. So can creativity help these people? I believe it can. I really believe it can. Now, the question is, how do you do that?
Well, yeah. How do you entice your workforce to be more creative?
Okay, so before I answer this question, I think we ought to go back a little bit and think about the state that the companies are, many of these organizations are. The fact is that many of these companies have lost their revenues, hence money is not as available as it used to be, which translates to a more limited ability to incentivize people by money, increasing their salaries, increasing their bonuses. So the companies are not always able to do that this way. The other situation that these companies are facing is they have to do something if they decide to deploy creativity. And I'll use kind of a cliche, and that is grave situations call for brave and drastic measures. What these companies can do is to reorganize or modify their structure to some degree that incentivizes the employees by means other than money. Okay?
Wait, yeah. What do you mean by that?
Yes, what do I mean by so you're basically asking how do you go about doing it, correct?
Yeah. Well, I think you use the word reorganization, and
Right.
I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've been in a company that has been structured the same way since the day that the founders did it. Are you telling me that we can restructure to make my workplace more creative?
Yes. So if you are unable as a company to really incentivize people by giving them more money for what they do, the only recourse that you have is giving them some incentives that are non-monetary, obviously. Now, the traditional companies are top down, where you have the executive branch sitting on the top, and the executive branch makes the major strategic decisions, and those are communicated through the people that report to them, which means directors, managers, supervisors, all the way to the workers or the line workers, depending on the company. Now, that works, but it also has the potential of stunting creativity and innovation. I think so. Nowadays, with traditional companies, the executive branch is perceived as something really on the Olympian, achievement of the company. They are highly esteemed. They are and they should be, because all of them are very capable, clever people. However, there's really very, very limited interaction between the executive branch and the employees that do the work. That's a fact. What I'm thinking is there is a protocol that can change that towards deploying a more effective deployment of creativity. One of the things I believe that the executive branch has to, let's say, change or create the perception that the executive branch are more actively or proactively involved and participates in deployment of creativity. Okay? It's important that employees start to get the perception. I emphasize perception because physically it's not going to be very realistic for the executive to go down and work with everybody else. It's impossible. But the perception is important, and that is that the executive branch conveys or communicates the sense that they are personally vested and committed to fund and they are committed to the success of the drive towards creativity. They need to create the perception that they are personally engaged with each creative process or problem solving. And it will be really advantageous if they are able to communicate the sense that they are personally interacting and contribute to this effort. Now, how it can be done? There are ways of communicating this commitment and involvement by occasional tours, occasional patting on the back that gives a bounce in the steps of people. They feel that they are part of a very, very important effort, by the company. Just that attention by the executive. It's so important. Now, that executive can be he or she, it can be the CEO, it can be the TCO, or the most senior person in the organization. But people have to look to this branch as somebody that is really invested in the success of bringing in creativity. Now,
let me interrupt you right there, because you've said a lot of interesting things, Israel.
Yes.
And I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Sure.
The first thing is you talk about creating the perception.
Yes.
Now, perception can have a negative connotation or a positive connotation, but I guess you're saying that you want to create the environment where. Is that right?
Yes, I would like to, I suggest to create the environment where the executive, is perceived as somebody deeply, deeply committed and personally involved, with serious creative problem-solving endeavors.
And I'm
yes.
sorry, but with the idea that executive deeply cares about that creativity, is not just kind of, putting on a mask and pretending to suddenly be creative, but, is actually being a champion. Is that what you're talking about? A committed champion to creativity and innovation?
Absolutely so. So, I worked like 36 years in industry, and what I have seen, all companies are innovative. All executives and senior management talk about being creative and bringing creativity in their workplace. The fact is, many of them, not all of them, they really don't know what creativity means, its dynamics, and how to bring it and how to implement it and how to foster it among their employees. Furthermore, they also don't know the difference between creativity and innovation. And not knowing the difference and not knowing how to go about it, creates a nice illusion. Yeah, and it sounds good that the company is creative, but what does it mean? Or innovative, what does it mean? And I think there are a number of components that need to take place. If trying to answer your question, how to bring creativity to the workplace. First of all, the executive branch, they have to decide and commit on funding the deployment of creativity in their organization. Without a decision and commitment to do that, and without proper funding, nothing will happen. It's all talk. Okay? Secondly, they have to adopt a protocol of structuring, modifying the organization for this deployment, the deployment of creativity and innovation. I mentioned already before, the executive branch or the executive has to proactively participate and give the perception that he or she are personally involved, invested in the success.
Well, let me interrupt you again, and I'm sorry for doing this, but
Sure.
you know what? I'm having a hard time relating to understanding what it means to be personally invested and how you demonstrate that. Over the course of your career, have you run across any good examples that you can share with the audience of an executive that, you know, is personally invested, that is this champion, and is that person that goes and puts a spring in everybody's step because she or he was personally engaged with them?
Yes, I had the good fortune to work as a consultant for 1 year in SpaceX in the West Coast.
I think we've heard of them, yes.
You heard about them, right? And I have personally seen the effects of Elon Musk, the founder of the company. He's the CEO of the company. The man is exceptionally bright. He's a genius. We all know that. But his personal involvement with the employees was absolutely miraculous. I have seen these engineers now. Most of them are young. The average age in this company is about 28. But these engineers, they have been so empowered by the proximity and interest, personal interest that Elon Musk has demonstrated almost on a daily basis. These people were incredibly committed. You know, sometimes they would spend like 24 hours, you know, on working on certain problems because of that, you know, sense of commitment and devotion to the company and a strong desire of wanting it to succeed. Now, we all know the results of it, right?
Later on tonight, there's going to be a Falcon 9 rocket that's going to take a set of satellites up, and I hope to see that from my backyard today.
Yes, well, I don't think I'll see it from Pittsburgh, but yes.
That's probably because there's going to be snow and ice and stuff, you know, all over your windows. I shouldn't say that to my friends in Pittsburgh.
That's okay. We don't have snow yet, but I know what you mean. I know the sentiment. So did I answer your question? This is a very good example. Yeah.
I mean, to me, this is an incredibly fascinating example. And you know, I'm wondering, you know, is that Elon coming up and asking you what you're doing? Is that Elon tapping you on the shoulder and saying, good job? You know, what does it look like when Elon Musk recognizes what you're doing?
It's hard to describe. It's hard to the power of this attention, the power of the perception that he's so interested in what you do. Incremental as it is in the company, you know, nobody solves all the problems in SpaceX, but you know, the different engineers that have their own assignments, they really view themselves as a tribe. Okay, in other words, if you successfully tribalize the workforce, where they really feel a strong sense of belonging and commitment to the well-being of the organization, you will be able to use creativity, you know, to a great effect. And I've seen it in SpaceX. And there are other examples in the marketplace, even though I was not involved with them, where the personal involvement of the founders and CEOs also made the companies very successful. For example, Facebook. I think Zuckerberg, I don't remember his first name, he was living with the people, his employees, from day one. Okay? And that commitment, that involvement, you know, helped propel Facebook to what it is today. Yeah, and it was all based on building of basically innovating, basically taking a concept that Zuckerberg and some of his colleagues had, that was the creative process, and implementing them. That's the innovation. That's another example. But his personal involvement, the perception that he's so close and understands the struggles and recognizes the contribution of his people, you know, was so important to the success of the company. And there are many other companies like Bezos and Amazon and so on, you know.
Well, I think you've given me a good idea for a follow-on podcast, which is, what is Facebook really? So, but that's for another day. You made a really strong argument and gave us some great examples of executives that are personally involved. And I guess intuitively, I can understand that. And intuitively, I know that's not the case everywhere. And I just look back at my own professional life. Besides that personal involvement, is there anything else you'd recommend?
Yes. So it's a combination of a number of elements. And allow me to start again where I started before. And that is, the company first has to decide, the executive branch has to decide and commit on funding and supporting the deployment of creativity. That decision and funding that's where it all starts, okay? Now, there's a protocol of organizing the company in a way that facilitates the deployment, that enables this deployment. Now, we talked already about the involvement and perceived commitment of the executive, okay, for the use of creativity and implementation and its implementation. The other recommendation that I have is a company that decides to move in that direction or to create a group of, I call them creativity facilitators. This facilitator it's a group, a distinct group that is comprised of people that understand deeply what creativity is, its dynamics, and how to foster it among individuals and teams. Now, this group will have several people, and they will work with different teams in the company, guiding them and helping them implement the creativity or deploy that creativity on the projects where they have to solve certain problems. Now, you cannot get a buy-in from people that are going to be involved with problem-solving endeavors without training them and let them understand the fundamentals of creativity and innovation. If they don't understand, these two, they are going to go through the motions, and there are many good researchers and there are many good problem solvers, but they are not going to do it as effectively as they could. Now, coming back to the creation of the creativity facilitating group, I'm not talking about a group of very bright people that come in and they are absolutely exceptional in their fields, okay, in their professions. Because these people, and I've seen it happen. A group like this was formed, but they were ignored. They ended up sitting in the office talking to each other because the rest of the workforce, the employees, did not appreciate what creativity is. They didn't get the introduction and training to creativity and innovation, and they didn't necessarily buy into a bunch of super intelligent people coming and dishing them down solutions, creative solutions. It doesn't work. So the creation of creativity facilitating group is different because these people are going to be tasked with working and guiding all the teams that will work on problem solving throughout the organization. Did I make myself clear?
I believe you did. And okay. We are running close to the end of the podcast. And I've been furiously taking notes because I find what you're sharing with us really fascinating. And I want to get back to something you said maybe earlier at the start of this discussion. And it was this. I mean, the reality is that for many companies today in the age of COVID, money is not available for incentivizing really any kind of behaviors. Yet, empowerment is available because empowerment seems to be free. So if you want to, if I understand you right, so if you want to incentivize people to become more innovative and more creative, you are empowering them, and you empower them through organizational changes, which makes me think of this very last question. What seems to be intuitive through the course of this conversation also seems to be a really tough message for management and for company owners that you need to change your structure to empower. Is that where we are in the age of COVID?
I believe so. I believe so. If companies continue to adhere to their traditional way of doing things, I don't think they will be able to use effectively the potential benefits and benefit from creativity and innovation the way it could be practiced. Look, you talked about incentivizing people. If you are unable to incentivize them with money, okay, what is left for you to do is to give them a sense of importance and sense of empowerment. They all, or most of them, like to be recognized for good work that they do, and the pat on the back is also very helpful. That bounce in the step goes a long way towards encouraging people to be more, to take more initiative and to be more creative, in the creative field. And that combined with some education in this area, that's the training component that I was mentioning to you, and the help and guidance from creativity facilitators, I think that will be very helpful to quite a few organizations. Now, when we are talking about restructuring, I'm not suggesting to change the basic structure of a company. You have the executive branch, you have the directors, managers, supervisors, and so on. I believe they can and should stay where they are. Okay? It's all a matter of creating a new perception. Okay? And that perception ought to start from the executive. Okay? And I already mentioned before.
And that'll be your final word. We are out of time today. I want to thank you so much, Israel, for this encore presentation. You joined us again, and I can't thank you enough. The need's out there. You're popular. You're super popular. So thank you. Thank you so very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me again. Thank you.